Chapter 6. I stood at Jean Manon's door for what seemed like an hour. His sister's body was gone. In its place lay a single lifeless rat. Finally the door opened. I had not found the courage to talk. Jean stood in the doorway. "What do you want?" he said coldly. I saw what happened to your sister," I said. He just glared at me. "Your father and mother?" I asked. "Nobody else," he answered. "Only Marie." There was silence for a minute. Finally, I blurted out a string of words. I wasn't defending them. It's Laroche who is friends with the Jews. It was his idea to help them. I only went along to please him. I heard the words come out of my mouth, as though someone else was saying them. Shame began to rise through my body like bile. I wanted to run. It had been 2 years since my parents had arranged for me to come here. Master Laroche did not have to take me. He was known for miles around. He had his pick of apprentices, but he knew my father was ill, and he liked me. "Christophe," he said when my mother first brought me to town, "keep your eyes and your mind open, and we will get along perfectly." Jean Manon spoke. "They did this, Christophe. They killed Marie. A rabbi in the north has confessed. It was a plot from Spain. A boy carried the poison from Toledo. The rabbi put it in the wells around Thonon." "Did anyone see him do it?" I asked. "No one had to see it. He admitted it, Jean said. 12 others helped him do it, and they are not the only ones. Martin told my father he saw Balagnitus, the Jew, lurking near the southeast wall the other day." "Martin? That's the one who tried to whack my arm off with his cane." "He's a very successful merchant. A successful brute, more like it. You should be careful who you speak ill of," Jean said, "and be careful who you keep as friends." "What is that supposed to mean?" "Things will get hard for the Jews on their Sabbath this week," he said. "There has been talk about your Laroche." Jean's eyes were set like an archer's staring down a bow at his prey. I began to get scared. "What kind of talk?" "That he is helping the Jews," he answered. "Some say Laroche made the poison that they put in the wells. Others say he has been cutting open corpses, even though everyone knows it is unnatural. The vapors escaping from the bodies have spread the disease further." I felt my ears get hot with anger. They have no gratitude. Where are all the other surgeons? They're gone, or they hide in their houses. They are cowards, like most people in this town. Even the priests refuse to see the dying. What about you? I saw you run from the church as fast as you could when the tailor got sick. "So did everyone else," he said. The evil look faded from his eyes. "So did everyone else," I repeated. I could not think of anything else to say. I simply turned and walked off. I left Jean Manon and the rat that lay where his sister once rested, and I walked. I walked past the place where Charles the tailor once lived. I walked past Madame Boubeau's dogs, which no longer had an owner. I walked past a tiny wooden coffin the size of a small child. Finally I came to the church and went in. It was dark and cool. I knelt in a pew and tried to pray, but my eyes would not stay open. I slept. That was gross. When the Black Death arrived in 1348, people wanted someone to blame. They looked for villains outside the community. In most parts of Europe, Jews were the outsiders. For centuries, Jews have lived apart from Christians. They shared the same towns, but Jews lived in separate areas now known as ghettos. Laws often prevented Jews and Christians from marrying. In some places, Christians and Jews couldn't even drink wine together. From time to time, Jews were allowed more freedom. They built temples and practiced their religion freely. Some Jews became skilled traders and made a lot of money. Most were educated, but prejudice eventually won out. Some Christians resented the wealth of the Jews. Others believed rumors that Jews kidnapped Christian children and murdered them. Around the 11th century, Jews began to lose their freedoms. Usually they couldn't own land or hold public office. Taxes were high, yet most jobs were off limits. Some places forced Jews to convert to Christianity. Others kicked them out altogether. When the plague hit, rumors started flying. People said that Jews had started the disease by poisoning the wells. In one small German town, Jews were tortured into confessing. They were put to death. After that, towns in Germany and France began killing Jews or forcing them out of their homes. In one city, 200 Jews were herded into a wooden building and burned. The Catholic Church did not officially support the killings, but the murders continued anyway. By 1350, Jews had been run out of nearly 200 towns. Thousands had been killed. After the plague, it took 300 years for Jews to resettle in Germany. Then, in the 1930s, Germany, along with most of the world, sank into a terrible economic depression. Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party came to power in Germany, and Jews were once again blamed for the country's problems. From 1933 to 1945, Germans under Nazi rule herded Jews throughout Europe into prisons called concentration camps. There, about 6 million Jews were murdered. The mass killings became known as the Holocaust. 6 centuries had passed since the plague, and no one seemed to have learned a thing. Chapter 7. I awoke to the sound of dogs snarling and barking. The pew was hard, my back was sore. Light was pouring through the eastern windows. I stumbled down the aisle and out into the morning haze. A dozen or so men were walking quickly down the street. 4 angry dogs led them, straining at their leashes. At the front of the pack I saw a familiar gleam. It was the walking stick with the silver bands. Behind it marched Martin the merchant. He struck the cane hard on the ground as he walked. It was a target practice, I suppose. I did not know for sure where they were going, but I felt a pit in my stomach. I ducked down a side street to get around them. Then I raced toward my master's house. I reached the door in several minutes, gasping for breath. I burst inside and bolted the door behind me. The front room was empty. I walked to the back door and pushed the curtain aside. The sight struck me like a dagger. Joseph sat on one side of the straw mattress. Madame LaRoche sat on the other. Between them lay Master LaRoche, sweat beading on his face. I walked up to the bed and took his hand. He didn't move. He's finally resting, said Madame LaRoche softly. It happened shortly after you left out yesterday. Began the same way it did with the others. The staggering, then the arms twitching, then the fever. Now peace for a while. It can't be, not him. Even with death all around us, I had somehow felt that Master LaRoche's kindness would protect him. It was as though she could see my thoughts. The disease doesn't care, she said. It is blind. I looked at Joseph. For a moment I was angry. He was here while I was gone. He had helped my master to his bed. He had held the cool cloth to his head. What gave him that right? I was about to speak when a sharp rapping came from the front door. Thwack, thwack, and then the crow's voice. LaRoche! Open the door, LaRoche! Madame LaRoche looked up, frightened. I stood up. We can't let them in, I said. They are here for Master LaRoche. Jean Manon told me. They think they helped the Jews poison the wells. Joseph jumped out of his seat. He started for the door. I lunged at him and grabbed his arm. What are you doing? They won't come in here if they know he is sick, he said, and they'll be content with me. They will have their Jew. I let his arm drop and looked at him in shock. I could hear the dogs growling in front of the house, but they'll put you in chains, or worse. What does it matter, he said. He turned to say goodbye to Madame LaRoche. Then he disappeared into the front room and out the door. I ran to the window to see the dogs, teeth bared, snarling inches from his leg. The man with a cane stood in front of Joseph, sneering at him. Someone else tied his hands behind his back with rope. They led him off, and I began to turn away. Then I heard a dull thud. I looked back to see the glint of silver in the air. Martin raised his cane a second time, then he brought it down hard on Joseph's back. I winced and turned away again. Chapter 8. I sat that day beside Master's bed and watched the room darken. I wanted so badly to wake him and tell me what I should do. For him to wake and tell me what I should do. I kept hearing his words, the first victim of the plague is human kindness. I pictured Joseph in jail, and I could not thinking that it should be me. What would they do to him? Accuse him of poisoning the wells? Burn him alive? They'd never stopped to question why he was trying to learn to cure a disease he had supposedly helped create, or why he would let his entire family die of it. It didn't make sense. I couldn't understand why Jean Manon and the others did not see. And how could I not have seen? Jean Manon had said that things would get hard for the Jews on Saturday. What did that mean? It was now Thursday. I sat long into the night, watching Master's face. Finally, I felt my doubts slip away. The great knot in my stomach disappeared. I got up quietly and slipped out the door. The jail was not far from the church where I'd slept the night before. I walked fast, thinking furiously as I went. I passed Jean Manon Street and turned in. His home was quiet. I slipped around the back and paused at the door. It was the north side and a window was open. I climbed inside and looked around. I picked up a large knife and a heavy iron crowbar and threw them out the window. They clattered as they hit, and a dog began to bark next door. I threw myself out the window, picked up the loot, and ran. The jail, the first thing I saw was the cane leaning against the front wall. Martin and another jailer, I think, stood talking quietly. I hugged the side wall and crept around back. A window with iron bars was cut into the wall at shoulder height. Inside, Joseph crouched in a corner on the straw floor. "Hey," I whispered. "What are you—" "Shh, I'm getting you out." I wedged the crowbar between the bars and the wall, and then I braced my leg against the wall and pulled with all my might. The bars creaked loudly. I stopped and held my breath. I didn't hear a thing. I tried again, but the bars didn't move. I heard Joseph's voice in a whisper. "There are keys inside on a shelf, if you can get the men away from the door." I thought for a minute, then crept around the side. From the corner I heard pieces of conversation. "Bodies in wine barrels. Send them down the river. Tomorrow night. Quite a bonfire it will be." Then there was laughter. Bonfire. I turned and ran into the courtyard. My heart was racing. I started to gather brush and twigs into the moonlight, load by load. Load by load, I crept back into the jail. In a matter of minutes, I had a pile as high as my head. I returned one more time and got a torch. Even now, the priest was careful to keep one burning every night. I ran back and lit the pile. Smoke started to rise toward the sky. I ran to the other side and looked around the corner. In a minute, Martin and the jailer began to sniff the air. They jumped up and ran around the building. As soon as they disappeared, I rushed inside. The keys were there. I unlocked the cell, and Joseph ran out behind me. We burst into the crisp fall air. Joseph ran. I looked down, grabbed the cane with the silver bands, and took off after him. We did not stop until we were standing in front of Joseph's door. I looked up. The night was lit by the moon. A million stars winked above. It had been a month since I'd found the dying traitor. In all that time, I could not remember a single night of clear skies. Chapter 9. We sat at a large table in Joseph's house. Everything was exactly as it had been when Master LaRoche and I'd been there. We sat in silence for a moment, then Joseph said, "How was he when you left him?" "The same," I said with a sigh. He didn't wake up. "You know," Joseph said, "when he was crazy with the fever, he kept asking for his son." "He doesn't have one," I said. "He meant you." I dropped my head and tried to swallow the lump rising in my throat. I looked at Joseph. He had torn the yellow circle from his shirt. Around his neck hung the Star of David that his mother had worn. "You need to leave," I said suddenly. "I mean all of you, everyone in the Jewish quarter." I told Joseph what I'd heard at the jail. We spent the rest of the night going quietly from door to door. Not a person was surprised by our news. Husbands woke their wives, mothers woke their children, and they all prepared to leave their lives behind. Everyone seemed to know without thinking where they would go. They were off to Montpellier and Marseille, to Spain and to Africa. They would live with cousins and brothers and uncles and friends. It was as though they had always known, and they had never let themselves feel at home. The next day was quiet. Once again the sun was blinding. All across the Jewish quarter people packed their belongings. In the shelter of the back courtyards they loaded wagons. They loaded horses and mules. They took what they could carry, the rest they left behind. When darkness fell, the procession began. Women and children rode, men walked. Joseph and I stayed behind long enough to see the flicker of torches bobbing up and down. Headed for the Jewish quarter. We stopped and sat on the hill a mile from town. The torchlight mushroomed into a large glow as houses began to burn. I turned to Joseph and touched him on the shoulder. We rose and turned our backs on Nibelheim for the last time and walked away. Epilogue. As I write, I am sitting in the library of the University at Montpellier. I'm 25 now. Joseph sits across the table from me. The plague is gone. So is about a quarter of the people of France. Other lands have suffered equally. The disease showed no favorites. Young and old, good and bad, they all died in massive numbers. When Joseph and I left Narbonne, we were to my mother's village. Somehow it had survived. They lost only their priest, a baker's daughter, and 3 old women. My mother took Joseph in without hesitation and showered us with love. For 3 years, we helped her tend her sheep. Then we went to Marseille to make our own way. Thanks to Joseph's brother, we are here. And in 2 years, with our eyes and our minds open, we will both be doctors. Okay. So let's look at the quiz. I think there are 30 questions. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead. So what did Martin say? Sick people should be locked up. Music was the best medicine. Everyone should stay inside the church. Master LaRoche should stay home. I think it's sick people should be locked up. People should be locked up. He was yelling at them. So that's the answer to that one. Who wrote this book? Todd Olson. How did Master LaRoche know about the plague? The village people told him. A trader told him. Someone wrote him a letter, so I told him. So a trader told him. What is another good name for this book? Christopher learns about kindness. Do not leave town. Christopher gets the plague. Joseph cures the plague. Did Christoph get the plague? No. Did Joseph cure the plague? No. I think Christoph learns about kindness because then he needed to leave town. Who is Christoph? A jailer, a doctor, a student, a Jew. Christoph was a student. Why did Joseph go with Martin and the other angry men? To search for his family. To get away from Christoph, to help people from other people, to protect Master LaRoche. So very much Joseph, to protect Master LaRoche. What did Joseph wear? A white mask over his mouth, Christoph's boots, his mother's Star of David, a black band on his arm. Didn't wear a white mask, Christoph's boots to his mother's Star of David. What did Christoph do to the sick man? Brought him to town. Yep, that's what he did. Buried him, gave him some money, ran away from him. So brought him to town. Where did this story first take place? France, Italy, Canada, Texas. I think it's France. Where first? Italy. In the end of that disease, it started with you. So Italy, sorry. Italy. Alright. I can give you the answers here. France, sorry. France. Okay. I didn't know it was like the very beginning. What was on the bodies of people with the plague? Red bugs, yellow hair, black spots, brown blood. Black spots, black death. Why did Joseph and his family have to wear yellow circles? They were Jewish. What did Joseph want to learn? Where the ice would melt, where Jean Manon was, how to cure the plague, how to leave the country. Joseph wanted to learn how to cure the plague. What did Jean Manon believe? The Jews had to be saved. The Jews caused the plague. Joseph was a Jew. The plague was not real. So the Jews caused the plague. First, he believed it wasn't real. What did Christoph learn about sleeping at the church? They were all better now. He's all better now. The plague started at the church. Master LaRoche was dying. His home had burned down. Master LaRoche was dying. Why did people shut their windows and doors? To block the sun, to keep out the bugs, to keep the air pure, to keep out the rain. Keep the air pure. Where did the plague happen? The United States, Canada, Antarctica, Europe. When did Christoph decide to help Joseph? After Joseph was put in jail, after Joseph got the plague, after he met Joseph's family, after Master LaRoche went to. So it was after Joseph went to jail. After the town meeting, someone said that blank the water. The medicine was in, the water no. The Jews lived close to the water, no. The ice now covered the water. The Jews poisoned the water, right? Why did Christoph set a fire outside the jail? To warn people, to help Joseph escape, to cook food, to get warm. Help Joseph escape. Who told the story? Jean Manon, Christoph, Joseph, Master LaRoche, Christoph. What is another name for the plague? Black Death, fuzzy rats, purple rain, green spots. Black Death. What is a plague? A group of rats, an illness, a medicine, a farm tool. An illness. Why did the Jews leave town? The wells had been poisoned, there was no food left, they were looking for new jobs, people wanted to burn their houses. They burned all their houses. What did people not know? What caused the plague? How Master LaRoche knew so much? Why the Jews were all healthy? Why the church burned down? But they didn't know what caused the plague. Now we know what they didn't know. What was against the law? Yelling in church, coughing, helping plague victims, helping Jews. Was very anti-Semitic. The first victim Christoph saw smelled like Master LaRoche, old flowers, medicine, death. He smelled like death. What happened when Christoph stopped at Jean Manon's doorway? He began to cough blood. He began to cry with Jean. He saw Jean's little sister Marie. Jean called the police. What happened when Christoph stopped at Jean? We saw Jean's little sister Marie, right? Who hit Master LaRoche and Christopher at the town meeting? The woman with the dog, Marie, Joseph, the man with the cane. Charles the tailor blanked during church on Sunday, fell onto the floor, sang very loudly, screamed about Christoph, said Meg was a witch, so he fell onto the floor. What did Christoph do at the end? Left town with Master LaRoche, brought Jean Manon to jail, left town with Joseph, burned down the jail. So he left town with Joseph. I went through those really quickly. If you have questions, let me know. But that's the second part.